It is 4:59 p.m. on October 19th, and we're gonna code in a little bit, but before we do that, I want to go for a run. So gonna run for about 30 minutes. I usually exercise after work, and then we'll start working on code. I'll come back after, and maybe my brain will be a little bit more clear on what I plan to do. So I just got back from my run, and I don't know why people like to run. I don't know, actually I do know why I run. Just to get some blood flowing, get myself awake. After 9 to 5 I get pretty tired. So I'm gonna take a shower and then gonna go on to coding. I also stream while I code. Feels like a good way to get people to work with me, and it helps me feel productive too. So I will be back after my shower. Alright, so I'm done with my shower and we're gonna start coding. I'm feeling pretty excited. I am at about a 7 out of 10 in terms of energy. It is 6:17, so it's about an hour-ish. I worked out, showered, I ate peanut butter and toast for my post-run snack. So hopefully I can get some work done. Alright, we are back, and today we are going to be continuing the modal sheet. We did this really cool thing where the nav bar now goes away with the modal sheet. This is slightly different if you go to the last video where the background over here used to be grayed out or kind of faded out, and now we do this through something called a scaffold, and it's pretty much just all jargon for saying that I moved around some code and I'm doing the same thing differently, but now it works a lot better with the framework that I use. So now we're actually going to continue with the Figma mock, and we did a few things that I still want to complete. We worked on the timers here for the start and end time. Don't worry, these little scroll wheels don't actually exist in mobile. It just shows like that because we're on a desktop. But yeah, hopefully we can continue on creating this product. No, go away, update. Whatever. I'll do it in a little bit when I speed it up. But yeah, we are trying to do this screen right here. So I'll just get started. So today I'm going to be talking about complicated logic. This session was about 6 hours, and I ended up spending a lot of time doing something that I ended up not needing to do. So what does that exactly mean? Generally in code, there are a number of specific logic branches that you're working in. So for example, an if-else statement has 2 branches. It can either go into the if statement or it can go into the else statement. For some reason, because there were UI widgets and UI components that were involved, it clouded my judgment to figure out what I actually needed to do. At one point, I even started coding something that I didn't even need. So in this specific example, what I needed to do was I needed to figure out the logic for the pending start time and end time. So essentially, when I pull up my modal sheet, what should the initial time be, and what time should be shown to the user but not saved necessarily, because a user can choose an invalid time range and we don't want to use the same time values that we have previously saved as the time values that we're manipulating. And so in short, after about 6 hours, the main issue became, how do we have the initial value be the current start and end time for a user, but then any values that are manipulated by a user after that are counted towards pending time, to make it short so that you don't have to do 6 hours of work if you have something similar like this. The simple way is to set the initial value when entering
the modal sheet to be the start and end time by setting the pending variables as the start and end time that you currently have. Even saying it in a post recording sounds super confusing to me, but it's the same as doing something like int I is equal to 5, and then the next line there's a for loop that manipulates an integer named j. And so the way the code looks is int I equals 5, int j equals I, and then now you can manipulate values of j without necessarily manipulating values of I. To say the least, even when dealing with logic branches that don't even seem that complicated, because the truth is that it was only 2 logic branches that I was dealing with, sometimes during a coding session, you can kind of get lost in your own thoughts. And when you do get lost with your own thoughts, there are 2 things that you should do and things that I decided to do for myself. The first thing is to take pen to paper. So if you're confused and you have all of these different logic branches in your head, write them all down. Draw visual pictures, write it out in paragraph form, whichever way helps you the most. And the second is to have a separate list of things that you're trying to accomplish. In trying to figure this out, because I didn't write down specifically what I wanted to do, I ended up trying to implement a alternative way to deal with the issue of my time values not being updated properly, which was to not let the user swipe away from the modal sheet if they had an invalid time range. And in about the last hour of my 6 hours, I realized that I already had functionality that I wrote down that I wanted to implement to take care of pending values that were incorrect. And in general, not letting a user do something or not letting a user escape a menu is not the way to handle invalid logic. I already wrote down that if there is an invalid time, users would be able to swipe away from the sheet, it just wouldn't save their changes. But because I didn't write it in a place that I was looking at and I didn't remember it, I ended up spending a lot more time than I should have to implement something that I ended up throwing out into the garbage. And yes, I technically learned more by trying to implement this alternative solution of disabling scrolling or swiping away from a sheet if there was invalid logic. But if I wasn't in an environment where this was a side project or something that I enjoy, it would cost so much engineering resources in terms of time, energy, money, however you want to see it, and for a lack of a better word, it would be inefficient. But if you do these 2 things, hopefully you can be like me in the future and avoid doing these actions and become a little bit more optimized in terms of your workflow and how you think and how you create solutions.
Hey guys, it is 8 p.m. It has been about an hour or so, and I'm gonna need some food, so I'm gonna have some dinner and replenish some energy and then get back to it. So far, it's going pretty good. Just doing a lot of refactoring, making sure that animations are smooth. I personally don't like animations or doing anything front-end related, but I'm sure that it'll be a little bit more fun once I get the hang of it. I just realized how much of a mess my hair is. But I am back, and it is 8:17. I just had dinner, had steak and vegetables, so that should definitely be enough energy, and I'm gonna get back to coding.
I think that part of the reason why the logic was so complicated was because in mobile apps, you need to cache certain values. And so the values that I was trying to store were times that were related to days, that were related to a weekly schedule. And so all 3 of those topics that I just mentioned are all class objects that I created. And so there was lots of nested class objects that I was reaching into, and sometimes it got a little bit too complicated when I was trying to find out what exactly I needed to pull in from which class in order to make the logic correct. On top of that, I was also making sure that state changes and any variable changes notified specific UI pieces that weren't related to the modal sheet so that they were also updated when preferences were changed or values were changed. So for example, when you swipe down the modal sheet with a valid time range, it needed to update the schedule list with that specific time range. Overall though, it was pretty fun. I would say that this session was definitely on the lower end. Maybe it was a 4 out of 10. I definitely was super frustrated with myself for spending so much time on something that I didn't have to, but I kicked myself out of that mentality just because I didn't want to punish myself too much or beat myself up over something that was in the past. I just think that it's super important that I move on because there's just so much to do with the app. There's so much more progress to make, and sulking around about some mistake that I made or something that was less efficient isn't going to get me anywhere. What is going to get me somewhere is being a better programmer. And the only way to be a better programmer is to continue exposing myself to different types of technology, to continue failing, continue getting errors, and most importantly, solving those errors. I think every time that I get an error, I kind of get reminded about times when I wasn't exactly the best programmer or just learning what a variable was or what a for loop was. And that kind of grounds me to remind myself of how far I've gotten, and it helps bring confidence to whatever issue that I'm dealing with currently. And that's why even though I was in the middle of my 6-hour session and even going past midnight and going into the morning, I kept on striving and kept on moving forward, not only because I felt like I had the tenacity to and the energy to, but because I knew that at the end of the day, I was going to solve the problem. This recording is going to be a little bit different. I usually record an outro, or I even try to record the outro a day after if I forget, but I completely missed recording the outro, and so this is just going to be me talking to you guys, so I hope that you don't mind. The reason why I missed recording the outro is because this session actually ended around 1 a.m. because I was so stubborn about ending that I just completely ditched my schedule and just tried to get to a point that I was happy about, and that didn't happen until 1 a.m. So I was so tired, I knocked out. I didn't even remember anything that I did the night before. It was honestly just a blur, and all I knew was that I finished doing the work that I set out to do. So to recap, what I ended up doing was I figured out how to do my pending time logic, and I also even worked on some of the notification snack bar messages so that they worked properly based off of what was happening with the modal sheet, or if a user swiped down with an invalid time range. And I even wrote down some tasks that I wanted to do for tomorrow. And in the next video, I do a much better recap of what exactly I did in this session or where I left off. So definitely make sure to tune in to get a more in-depth look into the end of this session. If you like this video, you like the content, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.